If this were Karate Kid or Cobra Kai, we would normally say that there's no such thing as a bad student, only a bad teacher. However, I would make an exception in this case for Rocky Balboa's first ever pupil, Tommy Gunn. Now, despite Rocky V being one of the weakest films in the franchise, both in my opinion and the opinions of many others, like Karate Kid Part 3, there are some highlights of the film and some topics worth discussing. Much how Cobra Kai was able to bring much more meaning to both Karate Kid Part 3 and the next Karate Kid, the Creed movies have brought new meaning to Rocky V, specifically in the relationship between Rocky and Adonis, and how that parallels the relationship that Rocky and Tommy had. So what exactly happened to Tommy? This is why Tommy Gunn failed as Rocky's student. Let's talk about the parallels between Tommy and Adonis, Tommy's fighting style, how he ranks as an opponent of Rocky's, the relevance to Creed 3, and more. Let's recap what we know about Tommy Gunn so far. Feel free to skip ahead to avoid the recap, but be warned, you may miss some important details later on in the video. Tommy grew up in Oklahoma and had a rough childhood. He got into a lot of fights as a kid and had a father who was a violent alcoholic who would lash out both at his wife and Tommy. When he was 13, one incident was so bad that Tommy couldn't walk for a week. He would later get revenge on his father and knock him out, and after becoming a fighter, would always see his opponent as his father, as both motivation and a source of his rage. Not long after Rocky moved back to his old neighborhood, Tommy sought him out for the first time and asked him to be his trainer, but this attempt was interrupted by George Washington Duke, who once again tried to convince Rocky to fight Union Kane. The following day, Tommy seeks out Rocky again after he reopens Mighty Mick's gym. Tommy fights Vincent, a fellow gym goer, though he begins to go all out, throwing vicious hooks and even attacking him after time is called. Rocky admits that Tommy has talent, but also says that he isn't a manager and wishes Tommy good luck. Later that night, for the third time, Tommy again tries to convince Rocky to be his manager. After claiming to be a fan of his since his first fight with Apollo and expressing his belief that Rocky is the best, Rocky invites Tommy to dinner. After an awkward dinner, Rocky invites Tommy to stay with the family for a while, despite protests from Adrian and Robert. As Rocky begins to train Tommy and help him climb through the ranks, he begins to spend less time with his family. At the same time, George Washington Duke also takes notice of Tommy, which Paulie also warns Rocky about, and begins to bribe him with a new apartment and a new girlfriend, Karen. Duke promises him a shot at the title while also convincing him to separate from Balboa, which works because during this time, Tommy is growing frustrated from not yet receiving the title shot and being constantly called Rocky's robot. On Christmas Eve, Tommy comes over with Duke and talks to Rocky about wanting to be managed by Duke. Rocky unsuccessfully convinces Tommy to forget about Duke, but because he wants that title shot, Tommy and Karen speed away in his new car. Tommy, now discarding Apollo's trunks he was given by Rocky as a gift, knocks out Union Kane and becomes champion. In his post-fight speech, he thanks Duke, and not Rocky, causing the crowd to boo him. Following the fight during the post-fight conference, Tommy is still considered to be a lesser fighter and in Rocky's shadow, and is told he should fight a real contender. Duke gives him the idea to fight Balboa, who he then challenges while Rocky and Paulie are at Andy's bar. Rocky refuses until Paulie defends Rocky from Tommy, who then agrees to settle their issues in a street fight. Rocky delivers a vicious onslaught on Tommy, but Tommy refuses to give up and nearly knocks out Rocky. As the two continue to fight, Rocky gains the upper hand and knocks out Tommy against a bus. The last we see of Tommy Gunn are two police officers who approach him, supposedly apprehending him for starting the fight with Rocky. Before we get into comparisons between the two disciples of Rocky, let's first talk about Tommy Gunn's fighting style. Tommy fights using the orthodox stance. Before training under Rocky, he mentions that he both competed in amateur and professional fights, but it would be safe to say that he also fought in street fights, as Rocky commented that he was more like a brawler, perhaps making a comparison to a younger version of himself. Because of how young he was, Tommy had stamina and could take the fight to longer rounds if needed, though at best, that is an assumption as we don't see a lot of details regarding what rounds his opponents were knocked out in. It's hard to say how strong Tommy was, but considering one of the fights ended with a near clothesline from the opponent coming off the ropes, it's fair to say that Tommy had punching power. Thanks to Rocky's training, he would learn techniques from both Rocky's and Apollo's fighting style. He would attack the body and would learn to slip the jab from not only Mickey's advice, but from the advice both Apollo and Tony gave Rocky when he was training for his fight with Clubber Lang. Tommy using Apollo's style would also be evident due to the bobbing and weaving he learned to incorporate in his fights. Prior to learning these techniques, Rocky told Tommy that there was no law against ducking, and like his eventual mentor, didn't have the best defensive capabilities, but could take punishment if need be. This is also evident in his fight with Rocky, where he didn't know how to react to Rocky's initial attack that put him on the ground. Gunn, like Clubber Lang, would learn to trap his opponents in the corner and punish them. Whether he learned this from Rocky or watching Clubber's fights with Rocky is unknown. In regards to his fight with Rocky, Tommy was not beneath catching Rocky off guard with cheap shots and sucker punches. He even resorted to MMA-like grabs and takedowns at different points during the fight and refused to give up against Rocky. However, we can't talk about Tommy Gunn's fighting style and not talk about the person who played him, real-life boxing legend Tommy Morrison. I would highly recommend checking out Boxing Legends TV's extra video, The Legendary Power of Tommy Morrison, as it offers a more in-depth look at Morrison's career, but to paraphrase from what I learned from that video, Morrison's left hook was one of the most standout punches at that time in boxing history. He had power that some say rivaled Mike Tyson's, someone else we'll also talk about in a bit, and while Tommy acknowledged the comparisons, he made it clear that he was still his own fighter. He also proved in matches that he equally had a good right hook and uppercut and didn't purely rely on his left. While he did run out of gas in later rounds, Tommy knew to use good lateral movement to stay out of harm's way. Morrison's record stands at 48 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw, with notable wins against George Foreman, Joe Hip, and Donovan Ruddock. As I mentioned Tyson earlier, this is a comparison worth bringing up, as Tommy Gunn's relationship with Duke was to mirror that of Tyson and King, with Duke even using the same catchphrase of "only in America." Another comparison worth noting that Tommy was a nod to Tyson is that Mickey gives Rocky a speech that is word for word the same speech that Cus D'Amato, Tyson's trainer, once gave to a young Mike Tyson himself. In comparison to other major opponents of Rocky, where does Tommy Gunn rank? Even with the addition of Mason Dixon to that list, in my opinion, Tommy comes in at last place out of all the major opponents that Rocky has fought. When you look at opponents like Clubber Lang, Ivan Drago, and even Apollo Creed, they all took Balboa to his limits, and all 3 of those opponents forced him to change the styles and the way he fought. Rocky had to build speed to stand a chance with Apollo at his best in the rematch. Rocky had to train like Apollo to beat Clubber, and Rocky had to forge himself into a piece of iron to trade punches with Drago. As I mentioned before, Tommy wasn't even prepared for the initial onslaught Rocky gave to him at the start of the street fight, and at the time, Rocky technically was at a disadvantage because of the permanent damage he suffered from the fight with Drago. Imagine if a pre-Drago Rocky fought Tommy. I think the fight would be over very quickly. I'd even argue that Rocky from either Rocky 1 or Rocky 2 would also stand a good chance, if not beat Tommy with very little effort as well. Does this mean Tommy is a pushover? Of course not. Although some of it was when Rocky wasn't looking, Tommy still took the fight to Rocky, even knowing how great of a fighter Rocky was. Tommy hit Rocky hard enough that it made him remember his fights with Ivan Drago or Clubber Lang, depending on which version of the fight you're watching. Despite this, I think Tommy only stands out because of how unique he was as an opponent, and something we hadn't quite seen in the franchise at that point. A former student of Rocky's who now wanted to defeat Rocky to prove he wasn't caught in the shadow. However this character was executed is certainly up for debate, but I also felt that maybe Stallone was trying to do what he could to have a new type of opponent. After all, Rocky technically fought a world champion, a hungry contender, and an overseas challenger. Where else could the series have gone? I would also like to point out that Robert's fight with Chicky even foreshadowed how the fight between Rocky and Tommy would have gone down. I feel like that's relevant because Stallone still regrets ever making Rocky 5 and how it holds up compared to the other Rocky films. What exactly happened to Tommy Gunn after his fight with Rocky? As I previously talked about in my Clubber Lang video, there was a slightly different version of Rocky 5 before it was re-edited for theaters and what we know about today. The fight in this version shows Rocky claiming he didn't want to fight Tommy and that he cares more about Tommy than Duke ever would, and it shows Tommy catching Rocky off guard with a different Mickey scene, and more flashbacks to both Clubber and Ivan Drago fights. After getting up, the fight is similar to what we see in the final cut, where Rocky turns the tide and starts to get the better of Tommy. Rocky tries to give Tommy to give up, though the fight continues. However, in the end, Rocky instead helps Tommy up, and one of the cops asks Tommy for his autograph, showing that Tommy finally earned the respect. If this cut would have been the final cut, we would assume that Tommy not only got his respect, but would continue to prove that he wasn't a puppet of Rocky. However, Sylvester Stallone, in an interview in 2005 with Ain't It Cool News, the same interview where he talked about what happened to Clubber, said that Tommy was exposed as being a project that would never be fully developed as a man, and also succumbed to a life of mediocre fighter barnstorming around the country, and eventually transforming himself into Tommy Boom Gunn, second-rate wrestler performing exclusively in the Midwest in third-rate venues. Again, take this with a grain of salt, as this interview is considered to be tongue-in-cheek. Stallone even says that Apollo would return, though as an unrecognizable zombie. The only time that Tommy is ever referenced after Rocky V is when Adonis first asks Rocky to train, where he laughs and says, "I don't do that no more," probably thinking back to when he trained Tommy. Despite all of this, Tommy's concept of being Rocky's student is still important because 25 years later, we would see Rocky take on a student again, only this time it is the son of Apollo Creed, Adonis Creed. Let's take a look at the comparison between the two. Both fighters had a rough upbringing, with Tommy presumably leaving home after the fight with his abusive father, and Adonis growing up in group homes in juvie. Because of this, they had nothing to lose like a younger Rocky. Tommy would amass a record both in the amateur and professional league, similar to how Adonis would fight down in Mexico to gain experience as a fighter. This would also make them similar to Rocky, who would also fight in underground clubs while training under Mickey. The two would seek out Rocky and ask him to train them, both being persistent in their methods, even after Tommy gave off the wrong impression, and Adonis trying to convince Rocky to do it as a favor to Apollo. Both would go on to move in with Rocky for a period of time while learning everything they could from him. Tommy would inherit the same trunks that Apollo gave to Rocky as a gift. Adonis would also later wear these trunks, though with some custom alterations to include both the name Johnson and Creed, as a gift from Marianne. Another problem they both had is that they were caught in the shadow of someone. Tommy was often compared to Rocky as his robot or puppet, while Adonis struggled with bearing the last name Creed and wanted to make a legacy for himself. While Tommy was focused on women and his girlfriend Karen, gifted to him by George Washington Duke, Adonis would build a meaningful relationship with Bianca Taylor, the equivalent of Rocky's Adrian. Tommy would eventually go on to be manipulated by promoter George Washington Duke and take the title for his own name, forgetting to thank Rocky and abandoning his trainer. Adonis would be manipulated similarly by Buddy Marcel, who was sought out by Ivan Drago to get a fight lined up for his son Victor to take on Adonis. However, unlike Tommy, Adonis would eventually reconnect with Rocky and ask for his help once again, as he left Rocky because he thought he could beat Victor the first time. Adonis would also become a world champion like Tommy, though the difference is he would defeat credible champion Danny Wheeler, while Tommy was a paper champion because of Duke's help. Both fighters would study the fights that Rocky had with Apollo, and would learn to fight like both Rocky and Apollo with Rocky's help, though the difference with Adonis is that he would also undergo a strict regimen to fight more like Rocky did against Ivan in 1985. Another key difference between the two is that Tommy would challenge Rocky to a fight, while Adonis would never fight his trainer one-on-one. One key detail that is worth mentioning is that both fighters would take precedence in a relationship of student and teacher over Rocky's relationship with his son. However, both would go on to indirectly or directly help Rocky patch up the relationship with his son. Tommy would do so indirectly by cutting ties with Rocky, and with Adrian's help, Rocky would realize that he should be focused on his family. In Creed 2, when Rocky and Adonis are patching things up, Adonis suggests Rocky to reach out to his son. Because Rocky is helping Adonis overcome that fear of expectations, Adonis in return helps Rocky overcome the fear of reaching out to his son. I think it's also worth pointing out that the difference between Adonis and Tommy is that Adonis had Marianne. He at least had a positive parental figure in his life, while Tommy had no one. Last but not least, both students went up the steps with Rocky while under his tutelage. We must also talk about the relevance between Rocky V and Creed 3. While the storyline is completely different in that Adonis must confront his former childhood friend turned rival, Damian Anderson, there are some very similar elements we should take note of. First, Dame seeks out Adonis just like Tommy sought out Rocky. Though the two already know each other, Adonis invites Damian to come by the gym, in a similar manner to where Tommy would seek out Rocky again at Mighty Mix. Dame shows off and doesn't take it easy on a sparring partner like Tommy did, and this goes on to put bad blood between the two. Dame is also jealous of Adonis' success and states that he's coming for everything. We can presume the fighter Felix Chavez that Dame knocks out is the same sparring partner he fought in Adonis' gym, as we can also see a poster for this fighter on the wall. We can presume he is also training under Adonis, which makes things even more personal for Adonis. This is similar to how Tommy attacked Paulie, and Rocky came to his defense and would go on to fight Tommy. This is all we know about the film for now, but one can't help but notice the similarities and how Creed 3 is going to go the Cobra Kai, or should I say Creed route, and bring some nice expansion to elements from Rocky V. Here are my final thoughts on Tommy Gunn. Although Rocky V is still one of the weaker films in the franchise, I think Tommy wasn't that bad of an attempt of having a new type of opponent in the Rocky series. If it wasn't for him, Creed wouldn't exist, or at least have a good foundation to go off of. Because let's face it, Creed did a lot of justice to some of the weaker films of the franchise, including Rocky V. It's a shame we didn't see more of Tommy, and that's probably out of respect for the late great Tommy Morrison, who passed away in 2013, but maybe someday we'll get an official word on what happened to his character. While he wasn't the most intriguing character in the Rocky franchise, and to be honest, he had slightly more death than Mason Dixon, Tommy was an interesting look at a pupil of Rocky who went down the dark path. I tip my hat to Mr. Morrison, who played a believable character and helped carry the film despite its shortcomings. Before I go, I want to give a quick shout out and thanks to my partners and affiliates. I now have official merchandise. Go to strifethewarrior.art or click on any of the merchandise below the comments section. If you're needing to defend your internet from Victor Drago's punching onslaught, go to nordvpn.com/strifethewarrior or use coupon code strifethewarrior to get a NordVPN 2-year plan with a huge discount. You can use NordVPN to unlock Netflix and your favorite entertainment websites that are not available here in the US. You can connect up to 6 devices at the same time with one account. There's no data logging whatsoever, and it works even in China. NordVPN works with Windows, Mac OS, Linux, iOS, and Android, has a Chrome extension which is very user-friendly, and unlimited bandwidth. If you're not happy with it for any reason, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. With 7 World Heavyweight Championships under its belt, it's no wonder why NordVPN is a winner. If you use this code, you also help directly support my channel. So go to nordvpn.com/strifethewarrior or use coupon code strifethewarrior at checkout. Last but not least, I'm sure I have a good majority of gamers here in the audience, but did you know you can grab some excellent games while supporting charities at the same time? If you haven't already, you should check out HumbleBundle. They've raised over $200 million in charity since 2010 and feature a different charity site-wide every month. If you see a bundle you like, you can pay for what you want and in return get computer programs, games, ebooks, etc. and the proceeds support charity. Go to HumbleBundle.com and use my referral link in the description at checkout. These referral links help support the channel, so thank you NordVPN and thank you HumbleBundle. Let me know what you guys think down below. What do you think of Tommy Gunn? If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it, subscribe, share it with your friends, and comment, as these all help my channel grow. Be sure to check out and subscribe to my second gaming channel. I'm trying to get this channel to 1,000 subscribers, and supporting this channel also helps me support my main channel. I'll be uploading more clips to this gaming channel, so stay tuned for that. Keep up with me on my socials via Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for watching, stay beautiful, stay awesome, and we'll catch you around next time.